So, tell me, sweetheart, what's your kill count? The question hit the Pentagon briefing room like a grenade. Rear Admiral Victor Haynes leaned back, smirking at the youngest officer at the table. 20 years old, female, no combat ribbons, easy target. 15 senior officers watched, some chuckling, others shifting uncomfortably. Lieutenant Junior Grade Sierra Donovan didn't flinch. Her hands stayed flat on the table. But something flickered behind her dark eyes, something that would shatter this admiral's 30-year career before the hour ended, and expose a secret the Navy had buried for 3 years. Before we begin, drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and stay until the end. Trust me, you won't see this satisfying twist coming. The silence after the question lasted exactly 4 seconds. 4 seconds doesn't sound like much. But in a room full of military brass, 4 seconds of dead air feels like a lifetime. Long enough for coffee cups to freeze halfway to lips. Long enough for pens to stop moving across notepads. Long enough for every single person to realize something had just shifted in the atmosphere. Rear Admiral Victor Haynes stood at the head of the conference table, arms crossed over his chest, that trademark smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. 62 years old, 34 years in the Navy, 3 combat deployments, a chest full of ribbons that told stories most people couldn't handle hearing. He was used to being the most powerful person in any room he entered. Today was supposed to be no different. "Come on, Lieutenant." His voice carried the easy confidence of a man who had never been seriously challenged. "It's a simple question. Every real operator has a number. Or are we talking single digits here?" He paused, let his gaze travel deliberately down to her chest, where her ribbon rack should have been. "Maybe 0. Scattered laughter rippled through the room. Nervous laughter. The kind that fills uncomfortable space because nobody knows what else to do. Sierra Donovan sat at the far end of the U-shaped table. She was the only woman in the room, the youngest by at least 15 years. Her Navy dress uniform was impeccable, but noticeably bare. No combat action ribbon, no deployment markers, just her rank insignia, and a single small ribbon that most people wouldn't recognize unless they knew exactly what to look for. She didn't move, didn't flinch. Her hands stayed flat on the table, fingers spread slightly, palms down. Admiral Jonathan Price, presiding over the briefing from the center seat, glanced between Haynes and Donovan. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He'd worked with Haynes for 20 years. He knew the man's tactics. Break the weak ones early. Establish dominance. Make sure everyone knew the pecking order. But something about this felt different. Something about the young lieutenant's stillness felt wrong. "Admiral Haynes," Price's voice was careful. "Perhaps we should return to the agenda. With respect, Admiral Price." Haynes didn't look away from Sierra. "I'm making a point. We're discussing strategic operations that will affect thousands of lives. I want to know that everyone at this table has the experience to contribute meaningfully." He spread his hands in a gesture of false reasonableness. "Lieutenant Donovan is a liaison officer. Coordinates with civilian agencies. Files reports. That's valuable work." The condescension dripped from every word. "But this is a combat operations briefing. If she doesn't have field experience, she should understand her role is to listen and learn, not to participate." Master Chief Elena Cross sat 3 chairs down from Sierra. 47 years old. Seal trident on her chest. 17 years of operations in places that didn't exist on official maps. She was watching the young lieutenant with an intensity that made the captain next to her uncomfortable. Something wasn't right. The girl's breathing was too controlled, too deliberate. 4 counts in. Hold. 4 counts out. Hold. That wasn't nervous energy management. That was tactical breathing. The kind you learned in advanced stress inoculation training. The kind that took years to master. Cross leaned forward slightly, studying Sierra's hands. Still flat on the table. Still perfectly positioned. But now she could see the tendons standing out slightly on the backs of those hands. The subtle tension of someone pressing down against an immovable surface. Grounding technique. Where the hell did a 20-year-old liaison officer learn grounding technique, Lieutenant Donovan? Haynes was enjoying himself now. The whole room could see it. I'm waiting for an answer. Kill count. How many confirmed enemy combatants have you personally eliminated in service to your country? Sierra lifted her gaze. Her eyes were dark calm and completely unreadable. When she spoke, her voice carried no heat, no defensiveness, no embarrassment. I don't count the people I killed, sir. The chuckles died instantly. Haynes's expression shifted. Still confident, but now there was a sharper edge to it, like a predator that had just caught an unexpected scent. Oh. He uncrossed his arms, leaned forward slightly. Too many to remember. That's what the real operators say when they've actually done the work. His smirk widened. But you're what, 20 years old, fresh out of the academy. When exactly did you have time to rack up a count too high to remember? More laughter. But it was thinner now. Something in the room had changed, and even the officers who were enjoying the show could feel it. Sierra's hands didn't move. Her posture didn't change. But something flickered behind her eyes. Something that made Master Chief Cross's hand move instinctively toward the table edge, as if preparing for sudden action. Because most of them didn't die by my trigger, sir. The temperature in the room dropped. Admiral Price shifted in his chair, leaning forward now. Several officers exchanged glances. Dr. Marcus Webb, the Navy psychiatrist seated near the back, went very still. His pen hovered over his tablet, no longer taking notes. Haynes barked out a laugh, but it sounded forced now. Didn't die by your trigger. That's creative. So what you called an airstrike's artillery, somebody else did the shooting for you. Sierra didn't answer immediately. She looked past him at the digital map on the wall. Red zones marking conflict areas. Blue lines tracing supply routes. Green zones indicating Allied positions. Her eyes traced a route that wasn't currently displayed following geography only she could see. Master Chief Cross caught the movement. She'd seen operators do that before. Mental mapping. Tactical replay. The kind of internal navigation that happened when you were reliving something you couldn't forget. Her heart rate increased. That wasn't a liaison officer look. That was a field operative look. I chose the timing. Sierra's voice was quiet, almost clinical. The route, who got extracted. A pause, barely a heartbeat. And who didn't? If you think a kill count defines a warrior, you're about to learn why the quiet ones are the most dangerous. Keep watching, because what she reveals next will change everything. Captain Ryan Torres, seated directly across from Sierra, set his coffee cup down with deliberate control. 44 years old, 3 combat tours in Afghanistan. He knew that phrasing. He'd heard it before in after-action reports that never saw daylight. The ones where the mission succeeded, but the cost column had names instead of numbers. Lieutenant? His voice was careful. Respectful in a way it hadn't been before. Are you saying you served in a tactical coordination role? Sierra didn't look at him. Her eyes were still fixed on some distant point only she could see. I'm saying that in certain operations, the person pulling the trigger isn't the one making the decision about who dies. Her voice was steady, clinical. The call sign, the coordinates, the timing window, the extraction sequence, those decisions happen upstream, And when you're upstream, she stopped. 4 counts in, 4 counts hold, 4 counts out. You carry different numbers. The silence that followed was so complete that Master Chief Cross could hear the ventilation system cycling, could hear someone's watch ticking 3 seats away, could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Something was very wrong here, or very right. She couldn't tell which. Haynes recovered first, but his confidence was forced now. Strained. Commander, if you're claiming you made tactical decisions that resulted in enemy casualties, I'd like to see the documentation, because my file is classified, sir. The words landed like stones dropped into still water. Haynes's jaw tightened. Classified files don't mean classified experience, Lieutenant. They usually mean administrative convenience. Someone wanted to hide a lack of qualifications behind a security clearance. Admiral Haynes. Admiral Price's voice carried a warning now. That's enough. With respect, sir, it's not enough. Haynes turned to face Price directly. We're planning operations that will put thousands of American lives at risk. I want to know that everyone in this room has earned their seat. Lieutenant Donovan has no visible combat experience, no deployment markers, and a sealed file that tells us nothing. He gestured dismissively toward Sierra. For all we know, she spent her career coordinating coffee schedules at some embassy, and someone stamped her file classified to hide the embarrassment. A few officers shifted uncomfortably. The insult was too direct, too personal, even by Haynes's standards. But Sierra didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't show any emotion at all. That was what made Dr. Webb lean forward in his seat. He'd spent 23 years studying stress responses in military personnel. He'd seen every variation of anger, fear, shame, and defensive posturing that the human nervous system could produce. He'd never seen this. The lieutenant wasn't suppressing a reaction. She wasn't hiding her emotions behind a mask. She was simply absent. Like she'd retreated to somewhere deep inside herself where the Admiral's words couldn't reach her. He'd seen that response before, in patients with severe trauma histories, in operators who'd experienced things that fundamentally changed how their minds processed stress. He started typing notes on his tablet. Concerning dissociative presentation, recommend immediate follow-up. Lieutenant Donovan. Admiral Price's voice was gentler now. Careful. You mentioned tactical coordination. Can you be more specific about what operations you're referring to? Sierra's eyes finally focused, came back to the present moment. She looked at Price, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, or acknowledgement. Crimson Gate. 2 words, barely above a whisper, but the effect was immediate and devastating. An older officer near Haynes's left Marine Corps insignia silver hair, the kind of ribbon stack that told stories of 30 years in places most people couldn't pronounce, went pale. Actually pale. The color drained from his face in a way that was visible even in the harsh fluorescent lighting. His hand gripped the edge of the table hard enough to turn his knuckles white. That operation is sealed. His voice had a tremor in it that wasn't there before. How do you know that name? Haynes looked between the Marine colonel and Sierra, trying to understand what he was missing. The puzzle pieces weren't fitting together. What's Crimson Gate? Nobody answered. The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10. Master Chief Cross stood up slowly. Her movement drew every eye in the room. Admiral Price. Her voice was steady, but there was something underneath it. Something that sounded almost like fear. I need to ask Lieutenant Donovan a direct question. Price nodded. Cross turned to face Sierra directly. Their eyes met, and for a long moment neither of them moved. 3 years ago, Cross said quietly, there was a tactical coordinator attached to a joint task force operation in North Africa. Call sign Phoenix 7. youngest operator ever assigned to that role. 17 years old. Sierra's breathing pattern stuttered. Just for a second. Just long enough for Cross to catch it. The casualty report listed Phoenix 7 as killed in action. Body never recovered. Cross's voice was barely above a whisper now. But I always wondered. The timeline never made sense to me. The body was never found. The file was sealed so fast. Master Chief! Sierra's voice cut across the room. Quiet, but sharp. What's your question? Cross took a deep breath. Are you Phoenix 7? The room held its breath. Sierra Donovan looked at the woman who had asked the question. Looked at the seal trident on her chest. Looked at the years of service and sacrifice written in the lines of her face. Then she looked around the table at 15 senior officers who had spent the last 10 minutes watching her be humiliated by a man who had never bothered to learn who she really was. Yes. The single word detonated like a bomb. Several officers actually gasped. The Marine colonel made a sound low in his throat. Not quite a gasp, not quite a groan. Something in between. A sound of recognition and disbelief, and something else that might have been grief. Haynes's face went from confused to shocked to something that looked almost like fear. That's impossible. His voice was hoarse. Phoenix 7 was killed in action. The report said 41 casualties. Sierra's voice was steady now. Eerily steady. 40 in the field. One tactical coordinator who was supposed to be in the kill zone. She paused, and when she continued, her voice dropped to barely audible. But I was 200 meters outside the perimeter when the strike hit. So I survived. I got to live with it. I got to carry them. Admiral Price's fingers were flying over his tablet, pulling up files, cross-referencing. His face was grim. Lieutenant Donovan, I'm looking at the Crimson Gate file right now. Classification level is... He stopped. Read. His expression changed. This requires special access programs, multiple clearances. How are you able to discuss this in an open briefing? Because I was Phoenix 7, sir. Sierra's voice was flat, mechanical. I have permanent access to all operational files related to that call sign. I am the file. Master Chief Cross sat down heavily in her chair. Her face was gray. Phoenix 7 coordinated a rescue operation in Libya, 12 American hostages held by a terrorist cell. The extraction was supposed to be clean, in and out. She looked at Sierra with new eyes, with terrible understanding. But something went wrong. The intelligence was compromised. Sierra's voice was distant now, like she was reading from a report rather than speaking from memory. The extraction team walked into an ambush. 23 operators on the ground. 8 hostages rescued in the first wave. 4 hostages and 23 operators trapped behind enemy lines. She stopped. Her breathing was visible now, the controlled rhythm breaking down into something more ragged. Command made a decision. Maintain radio silence to protect a larger operation. 200 special operators were moving into position for a different objective. If we broke radio silence to coordinate extraction, we would compromise their position. The casualty projection was 300 minimum. The room was absolutely silent. So the order was given. Sierra's voice cracked for the first time. Maintain silence. Accept tactical losses. Protect the larger mission. Admiral Price leaned forward. Lieutenant who gave that order? Sierra finally looked at Haynes. Really looked at him. And something in her eyes made the rear admiral take an involuntary step backward. You did, sir. Her voice was quiet. Deadly quiet. 3 years ago, when you were Captain Victor Haynes, commander of Operation Crimson Gate, you gave the order to maintain radio silence regardless of extraction requests. You said... Her voice caught. You said tactical losses were acceptable within projected parameters. The room didn't just go quiet. It went dead. Every eye swung to Haynes like synchronized machinery. 15 pairs of eyes. 15 expressions ranging from shock to horror to barely contained rage. Haynes's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. I heard them calling for extraction. Sierra's voice was stronger now, but something had broken in it. Something that couldn't be put back together. 27 voices on the radio, calling for help, calling for rescue, calling for anyone to answer. She stood up. Her legs were unsteady, but she stood. I heard Staff Sergeant Maria Santos calling for her team. Heard her voice change from professional to desperate to... Sierra's hands were shaking now. I heard Private First Class David Chen telling his squad to hold position, help was coming. Just hold on a little longer. Tears were streaming down her face, but she didn't seem to notice. I heard all 27 of them, for 6 hours, while I followed your order, while I maintained radio silence, while they waited for rescue that was never coming. The Marine colonel had both hands pressed flat on the table like he needed the support to stay upright. His face was wet. I was at Crimson Gate. His voice was raw. Different unit, different objective. But I heard those calls. I heard... He couldn't finish. I thought Phoenix 7 died with them. The report said 41 casualties. I've been carrying guilt for 3 years thinking the tactical coordinator was killed because I should have been. Sierra's voice was hollow. The kill zone calculation was off by 200 meters. I survived by accident, by a margin of error in a targeting computer. She turned to face Haynes directly. And you forgot. The word hung in the air like an accusation. You gave an order that killed 27 people. You wrote an after-action report that called them acceptable casualties. You got promoted to Rear Admiral, built your career on Crimson Gate's strategic success. Her voice was rising now. And you forgot. You forgot their names, forgot their faces, forgot that someone had to execute your order, forgot that someone had to live with it. Haynes's face was gray. His hands were trembling. I never meant... You asked me about my kill count. Sierra's voice cut across his stammering. Like it was a joke, like it was a game, like numbers are just numbers and not people with families and futures and... Her voice broke completely. She pressed both hands over her face. Her shoulders shook. The room watched in silence as the youngest officer at the table fell apart in front of them, as 3 years of suppressed grief and guilt and horror finally broke through the walls she'd built around it. Master Chief Cross moved first. She was around the table and at Sierra's side before anyone else could react. Lieutenant, Sierra, look at me. Sierra lowered her hands. Her face was blotchy wet, devastated. You were 17 years old. Cross's voice was gentle, fierce. You were following orders from your commanding officer. You made the decision that saved 200 lives. That's not murder. That's not failure. That's 27 people who trusted me. Sierra's voice was raw. 27 people who called for help and got silence. 27 people who died waiting for rescue while I... She couldn't continue. Admiral Price stood slowly. The movement drew every eye. Admiral Haynes. His voice was cold, colder than anyone in the room had ever heard it. You are suspended from this briefing effective immediately. You will report to my office at 1400 hours. We will discuss your fitness for continued command. Haynes's face went from gray to white. Admiral Price, get out. 2 words. No room for argument. Haynes looked around the room, searching for support, for understanding, for anyone who might take his side. He found nothing but condemnation. He turned and walked out. The door closed behind him with a soft click that somehow sounded like a verdict. The room sat in silence for a long moment. Then the Marine colonel spoke. Lieutenant Donovan. His voice was rough, broken. I need to ask you something. Sierra looked at him. Her face was still wet, but something had shifted in her expression. Something that looked almost like relief. For 3 years, I've been trying to find out what happened to those 27 people. Why rescue never came. Why nobody answered their calls. He paused, struggling to control his voice. You just answered questions I've been asking for 3 years. Questions nobody would address because the file was sealed. He stood up, walked around the table until he was standing in front of her. Thank you. His voice cracked. Thank you for remembering them. Thank you for carrying them. Thank you for making sure they weren't just numbers in a report. He extended his hand. Sierra looked at it for a long moment. Then she took it. Their names are on my wall. Her voice was quiet. 27 photographs. 27 names. I remember all of them. Every day. Every night. The colonel's hand tightened around hers. That's not weakness, Lieutenant. That's devotion. That's what command actually looks like when you strip away the ribbons and the rank. Master Chief Cross was still standing beside Sierra, one hand on her shoulder. Admiral Price. Her voice was steady, but there was steel in it. I recommend that Operation Crimson Gate be unsealed for internal ethics review. The families of those 27 service members deserve answers. And Lieutenant Donovan deserves recognition for carrying this burden alone for 3 years. Price nodded slowly. Agreed. I'm ordering an immediate review. He looked at Sierra. Lieutenant, you should know that what you did today, speaking the truth, facing Admiral Haynes, refusing to let those names be forgotten, that took more courage than most people will ever have to summon in their entire careers. Sierra didn't respond. She was looking at the digital map on the wall, at the red zones and blue lines and green areas that represented the complicated reality of military operations. 27 dots that weren't displayed. 27 lives that didn't show up on any current operational graphic. But she could see them. She could always see them. Dr. Webb stood up, tablet in hand. Admiral Price, I recommend that Lieutenant Donovan be placed on immediate medical leave pending psychiatric evaluation. What she's describing is severe moral injury. She needs support, not a briefing room. Sierra shook her head. I've been in treatment since 3 months after Crimson Gate, twice a week for 3 years. I have a therapist, a psychiatrist, medication for sleep. Her voice was flat. I'm not untreated, doctor. I'm just broken in ways that don't completely heal. Webb's expression shifted. Professional concern mixed with something that looked almost like respect. You've been carrying this for 3 years while maintaining active duty status. Someone has to remember them. Sierra's voice was quiet but intense. Someone has to make sure they're not just acceptable casualties in a strategic report. Someone has to carry their names so the next tactical coordinator understands the weight. She looked around the room at the faces watching her. If I leave, if I let go, if I move on, then they're just numbers, just statistics, just another after-action report that gets filed and forgotten. Her voice cracked. I can't let that happen. I won't. The room was silent. Admiral Price spoke softly. Lieutenant Donovan, you've been punishing yourself for a decision that was made above your pay grade. A decision that saved 200 lives at the cost of 27. That math is horrible. That choice is impossible, but you made the right call. Sierra's laugh was bitter. Broken. Then why does it feel like the worst thing I've ever done? Because you're human. The Marine Colonel's voice was gentle. Because you understand that numbers are people. Because you have a conscience. He paused. That's not weakness, Lieutenant. That's what makes you qualified to keep making those calls. Sierra looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at the empty chair where Admiral Haynes had been sitting. He asked me about my kill count. Her voice was quiet, like it was a joke. like it was a way to humiliate me in front of a room full of senior officers. She stood up straighter, squared her shoulders. My count is 27. Her voice was steady now, stronger. Not enemy combatants, not confirmed targets. 27 Americans who died because I followed an order. 27 people who trusted that someone would answer when they called for help. She looked around the room one more time. I remember every single one of them, every name, every face, every voice on that radio. Master Chief Cross's hand tightened on her shoulder. And I will keep remembering them until the day I die, because that's what it means to carry the weight. That's what command actually costs. She sat down. The room was absolutely silent. On the digital map, a blue line blinked, indicating a supply convoy moving through a safe corridor. Nobody was watching it. They were all watching the 20-year-old lieutenant who had just taught them what sacrifice really meant. And in the silence, something had shifted. Something that would never shift back. The door had barely closed behind Admiral Haynes when the questions started. Captain Torres spoke first, his voice sharp, with barely contained anger. Admiral Price, with all due respect, how the hell did a 17-year-old end up as tactical coordinator for a Tier 1 operation? Price didn't answer immediately. His fingers were still moving across his tablet, pulling files, cross-referencing data. His expression grew darker with every screen he accessed. Lieutenant Donovan. His voice was careful, measured. I need you to explain something to me. The standard age requirement for tactical coordination roles is 25, minimum, with at least 6 years of operational experience. Sierra's hands were still trembling, but her voice was steady when she answered. I was recruited at 16, sir. Project Athena. Experimental program designed to identify individuals with exceptional tactical processing capabilities. She paused. They found me through a standardized testing anomaly. My spatial reasoning and decision-making scores were off the charts, 4 standard deviations above the mean. Master Chief Cross made a sound low in her throat. Project Athena. I heard rumors about that program, always thought it was fiction. It was classified above top secret. Sierra's voice was flat. 12 candidates total, 6 washed out during training. 4 were assigned to support roles. 2 of us made it to operational status. 2. The Marine colonel leaned forward. Who was the other one? Sierra's jaw tightened. Specialist Ryan Okonkwo. Call sign Phoenix 6. He was killed in the field during our second operation together. The room went quiet again. So you were 17 years old, Torres said slowly, working through the implications. With no combat experience, no military training beyond this experimental program, and they put you in charge of coordinating extractions for a hostage rescue mission. I had 8 months of intensive training, simulation after simulation. They said I was ready. Sierra's voice cracked. They were wrong. Dr. Webb was typing rapidly on his tablet now, his clinical mask barely hiding his horror. Lieutenant, the psychological implications of placing an adolescent in that kind of high-stakes decision-making role, the developmental impact alone would be catastrophic. I'm aware of the psychological implications, Doctor. Sierra's response was sharp, bitter. I live with them every day. Admiral Price set his tablet down with deliberate control. When he looked up, his face was ashen. I've found the Crimson Gate operational file, full access. He paused, and something in his expression made everyone in the room go still. Lieutenant Donovan, the casualty report lists you as KIA, killed in action. Body not recovered. Sierra nodded slowly. That was intentional, sir. After the operation, Command decided it would be cleaner to declare Phoenix 7 dead than to explain how a 17-year-old girl was responsible for tactical coordination on a mission that resulted in 27 casualties. Cleaner. Cross's voice was dangerous. They faked your death to avoid accountability. They faked my death to protect the program, to protect the officers who approved my deployment, to protect— Sierra stopped, swallowed hard. To protect Admiral Haynes. The name fell into the silence like a stone. Torres stood up abruptly. His chair scraped against the floor. Are you telling me that Victor Haynes knew? He knew a 17-year-old was executing his orders and he covered it up? I don't know what he knew, sir. Sierra's voice was careful. I know that after the operation I was reassigned, given a new identity, new service record. Everything about Phoenix 7 was erased and replaced with the lieutenant you see now. Who authorized that? Price's voice was sharp. Who had the authority to falsify military records at that level? Sierra met his eyes directly. The same person who authorized Project Athena in the first place. The same person who decided that tactical genius was more valuable than ethical considerations. She paused. I don't know who that person is. I've never been told. I just know that 3 years ago I was a 17-year-old girl who followed orders and got 27 people killed. And then I was a ghost. And then I was Lieutenant Junior Grade Sierra Donovan Liaison Officer with a classified file and no past. If you think you know where this story is going, think again. What comes next changes everything. Stay with me. The Marine Colonel. His name tag read. Morrison pushed back from the table. His face was a mask of barely controlled fury. I was at Crimson Gate. His voice shook. I was on the ground. Different sector, but close enough to hear the radio traffic. He looked at Sierra with new eyes. I heard your voice. I didn't know it was a kid. You sounded so calm, so professional. When you acknowledged the silence order, when you confirmed radio blackout. His voice broke. I thought you were a seasoned operator, someone who understood the stakes. I understood the stakes. Sierra's response was quiet. I just didn't understand the cost. Not until I heard them dying. Morrison's hands clenched into fists. Private Chen was in my unit, 22 years old. He'd just gotten engaged. His fiancée was 3 months pregnant. His voice cracked. He called for extraction 16 times in 4 hours. I counted, 16 times, and every time nothing but silence. Sierra's face crumpled. I know. I heard every one of them. I have them memorized. Every transmission, every call sign, every— You were 17 years old. Morrison's voice rose. You were a child. And they put you in that chair and made you listen while my Marines died. Colonel Morrison. Admiral Price's voice cut through. I understand your anger, but you don't understand anything. Morrison spun to face Price. Do you know what it's like to lose men in the field? Do you know what it's like to hear them calling for help and know that help isn't coming? He pointed at Sierra. She knows. She was the help that wasn't coming, and she was 17 goddamn years old. The room was absolutely silent. Morrison turned back to Sierra. His face was wet. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I blamed you for 3 years. I blamed Phoenix 7 for not breaking radio silence, for not finding a way, for not saving them. He stopped. His shoulders heaved. I didn't know you were a kid. I didn't know you were following orders from someone who should have known better. Sierra stood up slowly. Her legs were unsteady, but she faced Morrison directly. You had every right to blame me, Colonel. I had every right to be blamed. Her voice was raw. I was the one who stayed silent. I was the one who made the call to follow orders instead of save lives. The fact that I was 17 doesn't change what I did. It doesn't bring them back. No. Morrison's voice was broken. But it changes who I blame. He turned toward the door where Haynes had exited. That son of a bitch knew. He had to know. You can't deploy a tactical coordinator without reviewing their file. You can't assign Phoenix 7 to a Tier 1 operation without knowing who's behind the call sign. Colonel, Price started. He knew he was giving kill orders to a child. Morrison's voice was rising again. He knew, and he did it anyway, and when it went wrong he covered it up, declared her dead, walked away with a promotion and a clean conscience. Master Chief Cross stood up. Sir, I recommend we suspend all further discussion until we can secure the relevant files. If Admiral Haynes was aware of Lieutenant Donovan's age and identity during Crimson Gate, that's not just an ethics violation. That's a war crime, Morrison finished. Using child soldiers, even in a coordination role, even with her consent. She was 17. In most states, she couldn't legally sign a contract. But she could coordinate life and death decisions for a military operation. Doctor. Webb spoke up, his voice clinical but strained. The psychological manipulation required to convince an adolescent that she was prepared for that kind of responsibility. The grooming, the conditioning, the systematic breakdown of normal developmental boundaries. He shook his head. This wasn't recruitment. This was exploitation. Sierra's voice cut through the rising tension. I wasn't manipulated. I wasn't groomed. I volunteered. Every eye turned to her. I knew what I was signing up for. I knew the risks. I knew the responsibility. Her voice was steady now, fiercer. Don't turn me into a victim to make yourselves feel better about what happened. Lieutenant, Price began. No, Sierra's voice was sharp. I've spent 3 years being protected, being hidden, being told that what happened wasn't my fault because I was young, because I was following orders, because I didn't know better. She took a breath. I knew, maybe not the full scope, but I knew that my decisions would determine who lived and who died. I accepted that responsibility. I failed that responsibility. Morrison stepped closer. You didn't fail. You followed an order from a superior officer, an order that turned out to be wrong. Sierra's laugh was bitter. The order wasn't wrong, Colonel. That's the worst part. By every tactical metric, Admiral Haynes made the right call. Maintaining radio silence protected 200 operators. Breaking silence would have compromised them all. The math was clear. 27 lives versus 300. The decision was correct. Then why? Torres started. Because correct and right aren't the same thing. Sierra's voice dropped. Because tactical success doesn't erase human cost. Because 27 people died waiting for help that I could have sent. And the fact that more people would have died if I had sent it doesn't make me feel any better when I hear their voices in my nightmares. The room was silent. Sierra looked around at the faces watching her. Senior officers, combat veterans, people who had made hard calls and lived with the consequences. You want to know why I'm still in the Navy? Why I didn't resign, didn't run, didn't eat my service weapon in some dark moment when the guilt got too heavy? Nobody answered. Because someone has to sit in that chair. Someone has to make those calls. Someone has to carry those names so the next generation of tactical coordinators understands what they're really signing up for. She straightened her shoulders. Project Athena was shut down after Crimson Gate. No more child prodigies playing war games with real lives. That's something. That's 27 lives buying something that might prevent the next disaster. She looked at the empty chair where Haynes had been sitting. But the people who authorized it, who approved it, who knew what they were doing and did it anyway, they're still out there. Still making decisions. Still treating tactical coordinators like chess pieces instead of human beings. Admiral Price stood slowly. His face was gray. Lieutenant Donovan, I'm ordering an immediate investigation into Project Athena, the authorization chain for your deployment to Crimson Gate, and Admiral Haynes's knowledge of your age and identity at the time of the operation. Sierra nodded. Her face was exhausted, but something had shifted in her eyes. Something that looked almost like hope. There's something else you should know, sir. Price raised an eyebrow. Go on. The casualty count for Crimson Gate was listed as 41. 40 in the field plus Phoenix 7. She paused. But the actual number should have been 27 operators plus 4 hostages. 31 total. Morrison's head snapped up. What are you saying? I'm saying that 10 people who should be on that casualty list aren't. 10 people who were in the kill zone when the strike hit. Sierra's voice was careful now, measured. 10 bodies that were never recovered. 10 service members who were listed as KIA based on circumstantial evidence rather than confirmed remains. The room went electric. Captain Torres leaned forward. Lieutenant, are you suggesting that some of those casualties might have survived? I'm suggesting that I've spent 3 years going over every piece of data from that operation, every satellite image, every intercept, every scrap of intelligence I could access. Sierra's hands were steady now. Her voice was growing stronger. And there are anomalies, discrepancies, things that don't add up. Master Chief Cross's voice was sharp. What kind of anomalies? Communication intercepts from 6 months after the operation that reference American prisoners, satellite imagery showing a facility that matches the thermal signature of the strike zone, rebuilt and operational. And 3 weeks ago, she stopped, swallowed hard. 3 weeks ago, I received an encrypted message through back channels I thought were dead. What message? Price demanded. Sierra reached into her uniform pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. The 28th is still out there. Raven 4 sends regards. The words hit the room like a physical blow. Morrison's voice was hoarse. Raven 4. That was Staff Sergeant Maria Santos's call sign. She was listed as KIA at Crimson Gate. I know. Sierra's voice cracked. She was my direct liaison during the operation, the last voice I heard before the radio went silent. She looked at Admiral Price. Sir, I think Maria Santos is alive. I think she's been held prisoner for 3 years. And I think I finally have enough evidence to prove it. The room erupted. Everyone was talking at once. Morrison was demanding immediate action. Torres was questioning the validity of the evidence. Cross was already on her feet, ready to move. But Sierra stood still in the chaos, her eyes fixed on the piece of paper in her hands. 27 voices she couldn't save. But maybe one of them was still out there, waiting, believing that Phoenix 7 hadn't forgotten. Admiral Price's voice cut through the noise. Everyone quiet. Silence fell immediately. Lieutenant Donovan, do you have evidence beyond this message? Something concrete we can act on? Sierra nodded slowly. Coordinates, a location in northern Libya, and a photograph. Show me. Sierra pulled out her phone, unlocked it with trembling fingers, and handed it to Price. The Admiral looked at the screen. His face went white. This was taken recently. Satellite capture from 11 days ago, sir. The facial recognition isn't definitive, but the build, the posture, the way she holds herself. Sierra's voice broke. That's Maria. I'd bet my life on it. Price handed the phone to Morrison. The colonel looked at the image, and his eyes filled with tears. That's her. His voice was barely a whisper. Oh God, that's Maria. He looked up at Sierra with an expression that mixed grief and hope and something that looked almost like reverence. You never stopped looking. All this time, while the rest of us moved on, filed reports, held memorial services, you never stopped. I couldn't. Sierra's voice was raw. I promised myself that if any of them had even a chance of being alive, I would find them. I would bring them home. I would finish what I couldn't finish 3 years ago. Master Chief Cross was already pulling out her own phone. Admiral, I can have a reconnaissance team ready to deploy within 48 hours. If Staff Sergeant Santos is alive, if she's being held at that location. This isn't a simple extraction. Price's voice was heavy. The political implications alone, operating in Libyan territory without authorization, the potential for international incident. With respect, Admiral. Morrison's voice was steel. One of my Marines has been held prisoner for 3 years because we followed orders instead of saving her. I don't give a damn about political implications. Sierra stepped forward. Sir, I'm not asking for an official operation. I'm asking for the chance to finish what I started, to bring home someone I left behind. Price looked at her for a long moment. Lieutenant, you're a liaison officer. You have no combat training, no field experience. I have 3 years of preparation. Sierra's voice was fierce now, alive in a way it hadn't been since the beginning of this meeting. 3 years of studying that region, learning the terrain, identifying potential extraction routes. 3 years of planning for exactly this possibility. She met his eyes directly. I left her behind once, sir. I won't do it again. The room was absolutely still. Admiral Price looked around at the faces watching him. At Morrison, whose eyes were bright with desperate hope. At Cross, whose hand was already reaching for her phone. At Torres, who was nodding slowly. At Dr. Webb, who had set down his tablet and was watching Sierra with something that looked like admiration. If you go, Price said slowly, and this goes wrong if you're captured, killed, or cause an international incident, I will deny all knowledge. You will be disavowed. Your service record will be erased. Again. Sierra didn't hesitate. I understand, sir. And if you succeed, Price's voice softened slightly. If you bring her home. Sierra looked at the photograph on her phone, at the face she'd been seeing in her nightmares for 3 years, at the woman she'd failed and couldn't forget. Then maybe I can finally stop counting the ones I couldn't save. She looked up at Admiral Price. And start counting the ones I brought home. 48 hours later, Sierra stood in a secure briefing room at Naval Station Norfolk, staring at satellite imagery that made her stomach turn. The facility was larger than she'd expected, heavily fortified. Guard rotations every 30 minutes. And somewhere inside those walls, Maria Santos had been waiting for 3 years. This is suicide. Master Chief Cross's voice was flat, but her eyes betrayed something else. Respect, maybe. Or fear. 6 guards on the perimeter, 2 more at the main entrance, unknown number inside, and you want to go in with a 4-person team, 5-person team. Colonel Morrison stepped forward, his jaw set. I'm going. Colonel, with respect, Cross started. With respect, Master Chief, I left Maria behind once. I'm not doing it again. Morrison's voice brooked no argument. She was my Marine, my responsibility. If there's even a chance she's alive, I'm bringing her home myself. Sierra looked at the man who had blamed her for 3 years, who had carried his own guilt, his own nightmares, his own list of names that haunted him in the dark. Thank you, Colonel. Morrison met her eyes. Something passed between them. Understanding. Shared weight. The recognition of 2 people who had been carrying the same burden from opposite sides. Don't thank me yet, Lieutenant. Thank me when we're wheels up with Santos on board. Captain Torres entered the room, his face grim. We have a problem. Sierra's heart dropped. What kind of problem? Admiral Haynes. Torres spat the name like a curse. He's been making calls, pulling strings. Word is he's trying to shut down this operation before it gets off the ground. On what authority? Cross demanded. He's been suspended from active briefings. Suspended isn't discharged. He still has friends, still has connections. Torres pulled out his phone, scrolling through messages. I've got 3 sources telling me he's claiming this whole thing is a fabrication, that Lieutenant Donovan is mentally unstable, that she manufactured the evidence about Santos to cover her own failures at Crimson Gate. Sierra felt the blood drain from her face. He's trying to bury this, again. He's trying to bury you. Morrison's voice was dangerous. If Santos is alive, if she comes home and tells her story, Haynes's career is over. His legacy is destroyed. Everything he's built for 30 years goes up in smoke. So he'd rather let her rot in a Libyan prison than face accountability. Cross shook her head in disgust. That's not just cowardice. That's treason. Torres held up his hand. There's more. Haynes is pushing for a psychiatric evaluation of Lieutenant Donovan. Mandatory. If he can get her declared unfit for duty, everything she's said becomes inadmissible. The Crimson Gate investigation gets shelved. The rescue mission gets cancelled. Sierra's hands clenched into fists. How long do we have? The evaluation board convenes in 72 hours. If we're going to move, we need to move now. If you think Admiral Haynes will get away with this, you don't know how far Sierra is willing to go. What happens next will shock you. Dr. Webb stepped forward. He'd been quiet until now, observing, taking notes. But something in his expression had shifted. I can help. Everyone turned to look at him. The psychiatric evaluation requires a preliminary assessment from the attending Navy psychiatrist. Webb's voice was careful, measured. That's me. I can delay the board. Buy you time. You'd put your career on the line for this? Cross asked. Webb looked at Sierra. At the 20-year-old who had carried 27 deaths for 3 years, who had been exploited, silenced, and forgotten, who was now fighting to save someone she'd been forced to leave behind. Lieutenant Donovan isn't mentally unstable. She's one of the strongest people I've ever evaluated. He paused. And Admiral Haynes is a predator who's been protected by the system for too long. If I can help take him down, I will. Sierra felt something crack inside her chest. For 3 years, she'd been alone, carrying her burden in silence, believing that no one would understand, no one would help, no one would care. She'd been wrong. Thank you, Dr. Webb. He nodded once. Don't thank me. Bring her home. Morrison pulled up the tactical display. All right, we've got 48 hours before Haynes can shut us down. That means we need to be in and out before anyone in Washington knows we've moved. Transportation, Cross asked. Unofficial channels. I've got a contact with a private military contractor who owes me a favor. They can get us into Libyan airspace without raising flags. And extraction? Morrison's jaw tightened. That's where it gets complicated. The facility is 12 miles from the nearest viable extraction point. We'll need to move fast and quiet. No firefights, no alerts. In and out like ghosts. And if things go wrong? Torres asked. Silence fell over the room. Sierra stepped forward. If things go wrong, I'm the one who takes the fall. Not any of you. I'll be carrying documentation that identifies me as a rogue operator acting without authorization. If we're captured, if this becomes an international incident, I'm the only one they can blame. That's insane. Cross's voice was sharp. You're 20 years old. You're not trained for field operations. I'm the one who left her behind. Sierra's voice cut through. I'm the one who has to bring her home. This is my mission, my responsibility, my risk. Morrison shook his head. We do this together, Lieutenant. All of us. No martyrs, no sacrifices. We go in as a team, we come out as a team. And if we don't come out, Morrison's eyes met hers, then at least we'll know we tried. At least we'll know we didn't leave her behind twice. The silence that followed was heavy with understanding, with acceptance, with the kind of commitment that couldn't be measured in words. All right, Cross pulled out her phone. I'll coordinate equipment and transportation. We leave in 6 hours. 6 hours. In 6 hours, Sierra would be on her way to face the ghosts that had haunted her for 3 years. In 6 hours, she would either save Maria Santos or die trying. Either way, the silence would finally end. The C-130 touched down on a makeshift airstrip in Tunisia just after midnight local time. Sierra's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her teeth. 30 minutes to target. Morrison's voice crackled through her earpiece. Everyone check your gear. Sierra looked down at her hands. Steady. For the first time in 3 years, her hands were completely steady. Cross moved up beside her. How are you holding up, Lieutenant? I should be terrified. Sierra's voice was quiet. I've never done anything like this. Never been in the field. Never held a weapon with the intention of using it. But, Sierra looked at the Master Chief. All I can think about is Maria's voice on that radio. The last transmission before the silence. She said, Phoenix 7, we're counting on you. Don't let us down. Her voice cracked. I let her down. For 3 years I let her down. Tonight I'm going to fix that. Cross put a hand on her shoulder. You were 17 years old, following orders from officers who should have known better. That's not letting someone down. That's being failed by the people who were supposed to protect you. Tell that to Maria. I plan to. Cross's voice hardened. When we bring her home, I plan to tell her exactly what happened. Who made those decisions? Who covered it up? She deserves to know the truth. And if she hates me... Cross was quiet for a moment. Then at least she'll be alive to hate you. That's more than you could say yesterday. The convoy moved through the darkness, engines running quiet lights off. Sierra sat in the back of the lead vehicle, reviewing the facility layout on a tablet screen. Every guard position, every entry point, every possible escape route. She'd memorized it all weeks ago, but she couldn't stop looking. 5 minutes out. Morrison's voice, tense, focused. Sierra's hand moved instinctively to the sidearm at her hip. She'd never fired a weapon outside of basic certification, never pointed a gun at another human being. Tonight, that might change. Lieutenant, Morrison's voice again, softer this time. Whatever happens in there, you need to know something. What? I read your file. The real one. Project Athena Crimson Gate everything. He paused. You were a kid. A brilliant, talented kid who got used by people who should have protected you. What happened at Crimson Gate wasn't your failure. It was theirs. Sierra's throat tightened. Colonel. Let me finish. His voice was firm. For 3 years, I blamed Phoenix 7 for not saving my Marines. I wrote letters, made calls, demanded answers. And the whole time you were out there carrying the same guilt I was, carrying it alone. Silence stretched between them. When this is over, when we bring Maria home, I want you to know that I forgive you. Not because you need my forgiveness, but because you deserve to hear it. You deserve to know that at least one person understands what you went through. Sierra's eyes burned. Thank you, Colonel. Don't thank me. Just help me bring her home. The vehicle stopped. Everyone moved in silence, weapons ready, communication limited to hand signals and whispered commands. Sierra followed Morrison toward the eastern perimeter, her heart hammering against her ribs. The facility loomed ahead, dark and threatening. Somewhere inside those walls, Maria Santos was waiting. Or not waiting. Maybe she'd given up hope. Maybe she'd stopped believing that anyone was coming. Maybe she'd accepted that Phoenix 7 had let her die. No. Sierra pushed the thought away. Maria was a fighter. A survivor. She wouldn't give up. She couldn't give up. Because if Maria had given up, then all of this 3 years of planning, 3 years of hope, 3 years of refusing to let go would mean nothing. Perimeter guard neutralized. Cross's voice in her earpiece. Eastern entrance clear. They moved. The hallway stretched ahead, lit by dim emergency lighting. Sierra's hand was sweating against the grip of her sidearm, but her aim was steady. Everything she'd trained for. Everything she'd prepared for. It all came down to the next few minutes. "Third door on the left," Morrison whispered. "That's where satellite thermal showed the highest probability of prisoner holding." They approached the door. Sierra's heart was in her throat. Morrison counted down with his fingers. 3, 2, 1. The door burst open, and Sierra found herself staring at the face she'd seen in her nightmares for 3 years. Maria Santos was alive, thin, battered, older than her 31 years, but alive. For a moment, neither of them moved. Neither of them breathed. Then Maria's eyes focused. Recognition flickered across her ravaged face, and she spoke a single word that shattered everything Sierra thought she knew. "Phoenix." Sierra's voice came out as a whisper. "I'm here. I'm finally here." Maria's cracked lips curved into something that might have been a smile. "I knew you'd come. I told them. Every day for 3 years. I told them Phoenix 7 would come." Tears were streaming down Sierra's face. She couldn't stop them. Didn't try. "I'm sorry." The words tore out of her. "I'm so sorry. I should have come sooner. I should have broken radio silence. I should have—" "Stop!" Maria's voice was weak but firm. "You did what you had to do. I understood then. I understand now." She reached out, grabbed Sierra's hand with fingers that trembled from weakness. "You were a kid, following orders, doing your job. I never blamed you. I blamed myself. I know." Maria's eyes were bright with tears. "I heard it in your voice. That last transmission, when you acknowledged the silence order, I heard your heart breaking." Sierra couldn't speak. 3 years of guilt, 3 years of nightmares, 3 years of carrying 27 names, and Maria had never blamed her, had never hated her, had spent 3 years believing that Phoenix 7 would come. "We need to move," Morrison's voice cut through. "Guards will be cycling in 4 minutes." Sierra helped Maria to her feet. The woman who had survived 3 years of captivity, 3 years of hoping, 3 years of refusing to give up. "Can you walk?" "I can run if it means getting out of here." Maria's voice had steel in it now, the steel of a Marine who had never stopped fighting. They moved through the corridors, Maria leaning heavily on Sierra's shoulder. Cross took point. Morrison covered the rear. A perfect extraction pattern. Too perfect. The alarm hit without warning, shrieking, deafening, turning the entire facility into a red-lit nightmare. "We've been made," Cross's voice was sharp. "Moving to secondary extraction point. Go, go, go." They ran. Sierra half-carried Maria through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. Guards appeared at the end of one hallway, and Cross dropped them before they could raise their weapons. "Secondary exit is blocked," Morrison's voice in her ear. "Tertiary route. Move." They turned, doubled back, found another path. Sierra's lungs burned. Her muscles screamed. But she didn't slow down. She couldn't slow down. Not when Maria was finally in her arms. "There." Cross pointed to a door at the end of the corridor. "That leads to the motor pool. We can acquire a vehicle. And—" The explosion came from nowhere. Sierra felt herself flying through the air, felt the impact when she hit the wall, felt the world go dark around the edges. No. She forced her eyes open, forced her body to move. Maria was on the ground beside her, unconscious, but breathing. Morrison was down, not moving. Cross was on her feet, blood streaming from a cut on her forehead, firing at targets Sierra couldn't see. "Lieutenant!" Cross's voice was desperate. "Get her up! Get her out! I'll cover you!" Sierra grabbed Maria, pulled her up, started moving toward the exit. Behind her she heard Cross's weapon fire, heard the sounds of combat, heard the Master Chief buying them time with everything she had. "Cross, go!" Sierra ran. She burst through the door into the motor pool. Vehicles everywhere. She grabbed the nearest one, threw Maria into the back, climbed behind the wheel. The engine roared to life. She didn't look back. Couldn't look back. Just drove. When you think you've seen the worst, this story finds a new way to break your heart. Stay with me. The extraction point was 7 miles away. 7 miles of dirt roads and darkness, and the constant fear that the next turn would bring headlights guards capture death. Maria was conscious again, weak but alert. The others, Cross, Morrison, did they? "I don't know." Sierra's voice was raw. "I don't know anything except we have to keep moving." Her earpiece crackled. Static. Then a voice. "Phoenix 7, this is Overwatch. Be advised you have pursuit vehicles inbound from the north. Recommend immediate course correction to alternate extraction point. Torres." He was still out there, still watching, still guiding her home. "Copy Overwatch. Adjusting course." She wrenched the wheel, took a side road, pushed the vehicle harder than it was meant to go. "Phoenix." Maria's voice was quiet. "How long? How long what? How long have you been planning this? How long have you been trying to get to me?" Sierra's hands tightened on the wheel. 3 years, since the day I heard your last transmission. Since the day I followed orders and let you die." Silence from the back seat. "I didn't die. I didn't know that. For 2 years I thought you were dead. Thought I'd killed you. Thought I'd killed all of them." Sierra's voice broke. "Every night, every single night, I heard your voice, heard you calling for extraction, heard you trusting me to save you. And now," Sierra looked in the rearview mirror, met Maria's eyes. "Now, I'm bringing you home. Whatever it takes, whatever it costs. I'm bringing you home." Maria was quiet for a long moment. "I knew you were young. During the operation, I didn't know how young, but I could hear it in your voice. The way you hesitated before confirming the silence order. The way your breathing changed when the extraction requests started coming in. I was 17. Maria's sharp intake of breath. God, 17. I didn't find out until later how unusual that was, how experimental. They told me I was special, told me I was ready. Sierra's laugh was bitter. I wasn't ready for any of it. You were ready enough to spend 3 years planning this mission. Ready enough to walk into a hostile facility with almost no combat training. Ready enough to carry me out when everything went wrong. Maria's voice softened. That's not a 17-year-old following orders, Phoenix. That's a warrior who refused to quit. The extraction point appeared ahead. Helicopter rotors cutting through the night air, Torres standing beside the bird waving them in. Sierra brought the vehicle to a skidding stop, helped Maria out, supported her weight as they moved toward the helicopter. Where are the others? Torres shouted over the rotor wash. I don't know. Cross stayed behind to cover our exit. Morrison was down when I last saw him. Torres's face went pale. We can't leave them. We can't stay either. Sierra's voice was agonized. The whole facility is on alert. If we go back, then we get them out. Torres grabbed her arm. We don't leave people behind. That's not who we are. Sierra looked at Maria. At the woman she'd come here to save. At the woman who had waited 3 years believing that Phoenix 7 would come. Then she looked at the facility in the distance. At the sirens and lights and chaos. Get Maria on the helicopter. Keep her safe. She handed Maria off to Torres. I'm going back. Lieutenant, I left her behind once. Sierra's voice was steel. I left all of them behind. I'm not doing it again. She turned and ran back toward the vehicle. Sierra! Maria's voice desperate calling after her. But Sierra didn't stop. She'd spent 3 years learning that some weights couldn't be put down. Some debts couldn't be canceled. Some choices defined who you were for the rest of your life. Tonight, she was choosing to be someone different. Tonight, she was choosing to go back. The vehicle's engine screamed as Sierra pushed it back toward the facility. Her hands gripped the wheel so hard her knuckles went white. Every instinct told her this was suicide. Every rational thought screamed at her to turn around. She kept driving. The radio crackled. Torres's voice desperate. Phoenix 7, what the hell are you doing? You're heading straight into a hornet's nest. I'm not leaving them behind. You already got Santos out. The mission is complete. Come back. The mission isn't complete until everyone comes home. Sierra's voice was steel. Cross and Morrison are still in there. I'm bringing them out. Static. Then Torres's voice softer now. You're going to get yourself killed. Maybe. Sierra's foot pressed harder on the accelerator. But at least I'll know I tried. She killed the headlights a quarter-mile from the facility, abandoned the vehicle behind a rocky outcropping, started moving on foot through the darkness. Her earpiece picked up chatter. Guards coordinating, search patterns being established. The whole facility was in lockdown, hunting for the intruders who had stolen their prisoner. Good. Let them hunt. While they were looking outside, she'd be moving inside. The eastern entrance was still accessible. Cross had cleared it earlier, and the guards hadn't yet realized it was compromised. Sierra slipped through weapon-drawn, heart-pounding. The corridor stretched ahead, lit by emergency red lighting. Smoke hung in the air from the earlier explosion, and somewhere in that chaos, 2 people were waiting for her. Or their bodies were. No. She pushed the thought away. They were alive. They had to be alive. Cross, she whispered into her earpiece. Morrison. Anyone copy set static. This is Phoenix 7. If anyone can hear me, respond. Nothing. Sierra kept moving. Past doorways. Past bodies of guards Cross had dropped during their initial entry. Past the room where she'd found Maria, empty now, door hanging open. Think. Where would they be if Cross was covering the retreat? She would have positioned herself at the best defensive point, the corridor junction, where 3 hallways met, maximum sight lines, maximum cover options. Sierra changed direction. The sound hit her first. Gunfire, sporadic, coming from exactly where she'd predicted. Cross was still fighting. Sierra ran. The corridor junction appeared ahead. Cross was pinned behind a concrete pillar weapon, raised, firing methodically at targets Sierra couldn't see. Morrison was beside her, conscious now, but clearly injured, his left arm, hanging useless at his side. Cross! The Master Chief's head whipped around. Her eyes went wide. Donovan! What the hell are you doing here? Returning the favor. Sierra slid into cover beside them. How many? 6, maybe more. They've got the north and west corridors locked down. We're pinned. What about south? Cross shook her head. Collapsed. The explosion took out the structural support. It's rubble. Morrison's voice was weak but focused. Lieutenant, you shouldn't have come back. You got Santos out. That was the mission. The mission was bringing everyone home. That includes you 2. Sierra checked her weapon. Full magazine. What's our play? Cross's eyes narrowed. You've got a plan. Maybe. Sierra's mind was racing. 3 years of studying tactical scenarios, 3 years of running simulations, 3 years of preparing for exactly this kind of impossible situation. The ventilation system. These old facilities all have maintenance access through the ductwork. If we can reach the motor pool from above, the ducts won't hold our weight. Cross interrupted. They'll hold mine. Silence. Morrison stared at her. You want to crawl through ventilation ducts into an enemy motor pool while we're pinned down by 6 hostiles. I want to get to the motor pool, secure a vehicle, and create a distraction big enough to draw their attention away from this corridor. Sierra met his eyes. Then you two move while they're focused on me. That's insane. That's the only option we have. Sierra was already looking for the access panel. Unless you want to wait here until they bring reinforcements and we all die together. Cross grabbed her arm. Donovan, Sierra, look at me. Sierra met her eyes. I've been doing this for 17 years. I've never seen a 20-year-old liaison officer volunteer to crawl into a death trap to save 2 operators she barely knows. Cross's voice was intense. Why? Sierra's answer came without hesitation. Because 3 years ago I followed orders and let 27 people die. I'm not following orders anymore. I'm making my own calls. And my call is that nobody else dies tonight. Cross held her gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. The access panel is behind you, 3rd tile from the left. She released Sierra's arm. We'll give you 5 minutes, then we're making a break for it regardless. Make it 3. Sierra was already moving. I work fast. If you've ever wondered what true courage looks like, this is it. A 20-year-old girl crawling into darkness to save the people who came to save her. The ducts were tight, suffocating. Sierra pulled herself forward inch by inch, trying to ignore the metal groaning beneath her weight, trying to ignore the voice in her head that said this was how she died. She'd spent 3 years carrying the dead. Tonight, she was fighting for the living. The motor pool appeared below through a ventilation grate, 3 guards visible, vehicles lined up in rows, and beyond them, the exit that led to freedom. 3 guards, 1 weapon, no combat training to speak of. Impossible odds. Sierra smiled grimly. She'd been facing impossible odds since she was 17 years old. She positioned herself directly above the nearest vehicle, a truck with an open bed. If she dropped through the grate, she'd land on the truck's roof. From there she could, take out 3 armed guards with a pistol and desperation, yes, exactly that. She pulled the grate loose, held her breath, and dropped. The impact jarred every bone in her body. She rolled, came up firing. The first guard went down before he even knew she was there. The second spun, raised his weapon, and took 2 rounds to the chest. The third was faster. His shot caught her in the shoulder. Sierra felt the impact like a sledgehammer. Felt herself spinning, felt the world go sideways. No, not now. Not when she was so close. She hit the ground hard. Her weapon skittered away. The guard approached, weapon raised, death in his eyes. Phoenix 7. He spoke English, heavily accented. We were told you were dead. I get that a lot. Sierra's voice was strained. Her shoulder was screaming. Blood was soaking through her uniform. Your friends at Langley will be disappointed to learn you survived. The guard's smile was cruel. They paid good money to ensure Phoenix 7 never resurfaced. Sierra's blood went cold. What did you say? You didn't know. The guard laughed. You think this was random? You think we captured your Marines by accident? He leaned closer. Your own intelligence services sold them to us, sold you to us. The great Phoenix 7, the tactical genius who asked too many questions about Crimson Gate. Everything Sierra thought she knew shifted. Not an accident, not a compromise of intelligence, a betrayal. Who? Her voice was barely a whisper. Who gave the order? The guard's smile widened. The same man who ordered you to maintain radio silence. The same man who built his career on your sacrifices. The same man who... A shot rang out. The guard crumpled. Sierra looked up to see Morrison standing in the doorway, his good arm extended, smoke rising from his weapon. Haynes. Morrison's voice was deadly quiet. Haynes sold them out. Sierra stared at him. The pain in her shoulder faded to background noise as the implications crashed through her mind. Admiral Victor Haynes hadn't just given a bad order. He hadn't just covered up his use of a child soldier. He had actively betrayed American service members, sold them to the enemy, orchestrated the capture of 27 people to cover his own crimes, and for 3 years she had blamed herself. We need to move. Cross appeared beside Morrison, supporting his weight. Donovan, can you walk? I can run? Sierra grabbed a weapon from the fallen guard. And when we get back, I can do a lot more than that. They moved. Sierra drove. Morrison rode shotgun, his weapon covering their escape route. Cross was in the back, already on the radio, coordinating with Torres. Overwatch, this is Alpha Team. We have Phoenix 7+2, requesting immediate extraction at primary point. Copy Alpha Team. Be advised we have incoming aircraft. Unknown designation. ETA 4 minutes. Cross's face went pale. Unknown aircraft, Torres, clarify. I can't. They're not showing on any military transponder. They could be... The missile hit 50 meters to their left. The shockwave threw the vehicle sideways. Sierra fought the wheel, kept them on the road, kept moving. What the hell was that? Morrison shouted. That was a Hellfire missile. Cross's voice was grim. American manufacture. American deployment system. Sierra's hands tightened on the wheel. Haynes! He's covering his tracks. Morrison's voice was deadly. If we don't make it back, if we die out here, there's no one left to expose him. Maria. Sierra's heart lurched. Maria's at the extraction point. If he's targeting Torres... Cross was back on the radio. Get Santos airborne now. Do you copy? Get her airborne? Static crackled. Then Torres's voice, stressed but calm. Already moving. We saw the missile strike. Figured someone was cleaning house. Someone is. Sierra pushed the accelerator to the floor. And we're the loose ends. The second missile hit closer. The vehicle shuddered but kept moving. 2 minutes to extraction point. Cross counted down. Come on, Donovan. We're almost there. Almost there. 3 years of planning. 3 years of guilt. 3 years of carrying 27 names. And now she was minutes away from exposing the man who had caused it all. If she survived. The extraction point appeared ahead. Torres was gone airborne, with Maria hopefully already on their way to safety. But another helicopter sat waiting rotors, spinning a figure beside it, waving them in. Dr. Webb. Sierra brought the vehicle to a skidding halt. They piled out, ran for the helicopter, threw themselves inside as another missile streaked through the sky behind them. Go! Cross screamed. Get us airborne! The helicopter lurched into the sky. Below them, the vehicle they'd abandoned exploded into flames. That was too close. Morrison collapsed against the bulkhead, clutching his injured arm. Way too close. Sierra looked out the window at the flames below, at the facility in the distance, at the chaos she'd left behind. Then she turned to Webb. How did you know to be here? Webb's face was grim. Because 30 minutes ago I received a classified communication ordering the immediate termination of Operation Phoenix Resurrection. The authorization code was Admiral Haynes's personal cipher. He ordered our deaths. Sierra's voice was flat. He ordered your erasure. All of you. Santos, Cross, Morrison, me. Webb pulled out a tablet. And when I traced the authorization back through the system, I found something else. Something that changes everything. He turned the tablet toward her. Sierra looked at the screen. Documents, transfer orders, financial records, communications logs, and at the center of it all, Admiral Victor Haynes's name. He's been running this operation for years. Webb's voice was quiet, but intense. Project Athena wasn't just an experimental program. It was a front, a way to identify assets that could be controlled, manipulated, and ultimately disposed of when they became inconvenient. Assets like me. Assets like you. Like the other Phoenix operators. Like every tactical coordinator who ever asked questions about why their orders didn't make sense. Webb scrolled through the documents. Crimson Gate wasn't a tragedy. It was intentional. Haynes orchestrated the ambush, fed intelligence to the enemy, ensured that 27 witnesses to his corruption would never make it home. Sierra felt the world tilt beneath her. Not a mistake, not a tactical error, not acceptable casualties. Murder. Admiral Victor Haynes had murdered 27 American service members to protect his criminal enterprise. And he had used a 17-year-old girl to do it. The radio silence order. Sierra's voice was barely a whisper. He knew. He knew that if I maintained silence, they would die, and he gave the order anyway. He gave the order specifically because he knew they would die. Webb's voice was gentle. Terrible. You were never meant to be the tactical coordinator who made a hard choice, Sierra. You were meant to be the scapegoat, the child soldier who could be blamed when questions were asked, the ghost who could be declared dead and forgotten. 3 years. 3 years of guilt. 3 years of nightmares. 3 years of carrying 27 names on her shoulders. And it had all been a lie. He made me kill them. Sierra's voice broke. He used me to kill my own people. He tried to. Morrison's voice cut through. Strong, angry. But he failed. You survived. Maria survived. And now we have everything we need to destroy him. Sierra looked at the tablet in her hands, at the evidence of betrayal and corruption and murder, at the key to her redemption. How do we do this? Her voice was stronger now, harder. How do we take him down? We don't. Cross's voice was grim. The system is compromised. Haynes has allies throughout the chain of command. If we try to go through official channels, we'll be silenced before we can present any evidence. Then we go around the system. Sierra looked up. We go public. Public, Morrison's eyes widened. That would mean congressional testimony, media exposure, full disclosure of everything Project Athena Crimson Gate, the betrayal, the cover-up. Sierra's jaw set. Everything. You'd be exposing yourself. Webb's voice was careful. Your identity. Your age at the time of Crimson Gate. Everything you've been protected from for 3 years. Protected. Sierra's laugh was bitter. I wasn't protected. I was silenced. Hidden. Made to carry guilt that was never mine while the man responsible got promoted and praised. She shook her head. No more hiding. No more silence. The truth comes out, all of it. Cross studied her for a long moment. You understand what that means. Your career will be over. Your anonymity will be gone. You'll spend the rest of your life as the girl who blew the whistle on one of the Navy's most decorated admirals. Good. Sierra's voice was fierce. I've spent 3 years being the girl who killed 27 people. I'd rather be the girl who brought their murderer to justice. Morrison reached over with his good hand, squeezed her shoulder gently. Then that's what we do. Together. All of us. Cross nodded slowly. Together. Webb lifted his tablet. I've already made copies of everything, distributed to secure locations. If anything happens to any of us, Nothing's going to happen to us. Sierra's voice carried conviction, certainty. We're going to walk into Washington. We're going to tell the truth. And we're going to watch Victor Haynes answer for every single name on that casualty list. She looked out the window at the darkness rushing past. 27 names, 27 lives, 27 reasons to fight. And finally, after 3 years, she had the power to give them justice. The helicopter turned north, toward home, toward truth, toward the reckoning that had been 3 years in the making. Behind them, the facility burned. Ahead of them, an admiral waited. And Sierra Donovan Phoenix 7, the girl who had been used and broken and buried, was finally ready to rise. The Senate hearing room was packed, senators, military officials, press corps with cameras rolling, and in the front row, Admiral Victor Haynes sat with his legal team, his face a mask of controlled confidence. He had no idea what was coming. Sierra stood outside the chamber doors, her hands steady for the first time in 3 years. The wound in her shoulder throbbed beneath the bandage, but she barely noticed. Pain was temporary. Justice was permanent. "You ready for this?" Morrison stood beside her, his arm in a sling, his eyes fierce. "I've been ready for 3 years. I just didn't know it." Cross appeared from around the corner. "They're calling you in. Senator Mitchell wants to start with your testimony." Sierra nodded, straightened her uniform. The same bare uniform that Haynes had mocked just 1 week ago. No ribbons, no combat badges. Nothing to indicate what she'd survived, what she'd accomplished, what she'd become. That was about to change. "One more thing." Cross handed her a small box. "This arrived this morning, from Admiral Price." Sierra opened it. Inside lay a single ribbon, purple and white. The combat action ribbon she'd never been awarded because officially Phoenix 7 had never existed. "Price wanted you to have it before you testified. He said," Cross's voice caught, "he said you earned it 3 times over." Sierra's fingers trembled as she lifted the ribbon. Such a small thing, a piece of cloth and metal, but it represented everything she'd fought for, everything she'd suffered, everything she'd refused to let die. She pinned it to her chest. "Let's finish this." The doors opened. Sierra walked into the hearing room. Every eye turned toward her. Cameras flashed. Whispers rippled through the crowd. And at the defendant's table, Admiral Haynes went pale. "Lieutenant Junior Grade Sierra Donovan," Senator Mitchell's voice cut through the noise. "Please take your seat." Sierra walked past Haynes. Their eyes met. For one long moment, neither of them moved. Neither of them breathed. Then Sierra smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who had carried 27 names for 3 years. Someone who had crawled through fire to save the people Haynes had tried to bury. Someone who was about to burn his world to the ground. She took her seat at the witness table. "Lieutenant Donovan." Senator Mitchell leaned forward. "You've submitted extensive documentation regarding an operation called Crimson Gate. Before we proceed, I need to ask you a direct question." "Yes, Senator." "Are you prepared to testify under oath that Admiral Victor Haynes deliberately orchestrated the deaths of 27 American service members?" The room held its breath. Sierra looked at Haynes. At the man who had used her, broken her, tried to erase her. "Yes, Senator, I am. If you've been waiting for the moment when everything comes together, this is it. Stay with me until the end." Haynes's lawyer jumped to his feet. "Objection, this witness has a documented history of psychological instability. Her testimony cannot be considered reliable." "Sit down, counselor." Senator Mitchell's voice was sharp. This isn't a courtroom, and I didn't ask for your opinion. He turned back to Sierra. Lieutenant, please proceed. Sierra took a breath, steadied herself, and began. 3 years ago, I was 17 years old. I was recruited into a classified program called Project Athena. The program was designed to identify individuals with exceptional tactical processing capabilities and train them for high-stakes coordination roles. She paused. Let the words sink in. I was assigned the call sign Phoenix 7. At 17, I became the youngest tactical coordinator in Navy history. And on my second operation, Crimson Gate, I was ordered to maintain radio silence while 27 American service members called for extraction. Murmurs swept through the room. I followed that order. I maintained silence, and 27 people died. Sierra's voice cracked, but she pushed through. For 3 years, I blamed myself. I carried their names. I attended their funerals. I lived with the guilt of believing I had killed them. She turned to look directly at Haynes. But I didn't kill them. Admiral Haynes did. Haynes's face contorted. That's a lie. I made a tactical decision based on, you made a deal. Sierra's voice cut across his. You sold intelligence to enemy forces. You orchestrated the ambush that trapped those 27 Marines, and you used me, a 17-year-old child, to execute your murder order. The room erupted. Senator Mitchell banged his gavel. Order! Order! Haynes was on his feet now, his lawyer trying to restrain him. You have no proof. You have nothing but the delusions of a mentally unstable, I have everything. Sierra pulled out a tablet. Financial records showing payments from foreign intelligence services to accounts controlled by Admiral Haynes. Communication logs proving he fed operational details to enemy forces before Crimson Gate. Transfer orders showing he specifically requested my assignment to the operation because he knew a 17-year-old could be manipulated, silenced, and ultimately erased. She stood up, walked toward the center of the room. And I have testimony from Staff Sergeant Maria Santos. One of the Marines Admiral Haynes tried to murder. One of the Marines who survived 3 years of captivity because she refused to give up hope that someone would come for her. And a door at the sides of the chamber opened. Maria Santos walked in, thin, scarred, but alive, walking under her own power, head held high. The room went absolutely silent. Maria approached the witness table, stood beside Sierra, looked at Haynes with eyes that held 3 years of suffering, 3 years of waiting, 3 years of refusing to break. Admiral Haynes, Maria's voice was rough, damaged, but strong. Do you remember me? Haynes's face had gone gray. His hands were shaking. I was at Crimson Gate. I called for extraction 16 times in 4 hours, and every time I got silence. Maria took a step closer. Do you know what I did during those 3 years in captivity I talked? I told my captors everything I knew about you, about your operation, about the American admiral who sold his own people to protect his secrets. She smiled. It was not a kind smile. They recorded it all, every confession, every detail, every piece of evidence that proves you're a traitor. She pulled a flash drive from her pocket. And now, so does the United States Senate. The room exploded. Senators shouting, lawyers scrambling, press corps going wild, military officials rushing toward the exits to make calls, issue orders, begin the process of dismantling everything Admiral Victor Haynes had built. And in the center of it all, Sierra Donovan stood still, watching, waiting. 3 years of guilt lifting from her shoulders like smoke dissipating in the wind. If you've ever doubted that one person can change everything, watch what happens next. Haynes made a break for the door. Morrison was faster. The colonel intercepted him 3 steps from the exit. his good arm shooting out to grab Haynes by the collar. The Admiral struggled, but Morrison's grip was iron. "Going somewhere, sir?" Morrison's voice was deadly quiet. "I don't think we're done here." "You can't do this!" Haynes's voice was high, panicked. "I'm a Rear Admiral. I have rights. You have the right to remain silent." Master Chief Cross appeared beside Morrison's zip ties in hand. "You have the right to an attorney. You have the right to spend the rest of your miserable life in Leavenworth thinking about the 27 people you murdered." She secured his wrists with efficient precision. "Admiral Victor Haynes, you are under arrest for treason, conspiracy to commit murder, and violations of the Uniform Code of Military Justice." Cross leaned close. "And personally, I hope they throw away the key." Military police flooded the room. Haynes was led away, his protests lost in the chaos. His lawyers were scrambling, trying to reach him, trying to salvage something from the wreckage of his life. There was nothing left to salvage. Senator Mitchell's voice cut through the noise. "Lieutenant Donovan, a moment, please." Sierra turned. The senator had descended from his platform and was walking toward her. His face was grave, but there was something else in his eyes. Respect, maybe. Or admiration. "What you did today took extraordinary courage." His voice was quiet, meant only for her. Exposing a decorated admiral. Risking your career, your reputation, your safety. Most people would have walked away, found a way to move on, buried it. "I tried to bury it, Senator." Sierra's voice was tired, hollow. "For 3 years I tried, but some things won't stay buried. Some debts won't stay unpaid." Mitchell nodded slowly. "What will you do now? The Navy will want to debrief you. The investigation will take months, possibly years. Your identity, your history, it's all going to come out." Sierra looked across the room at Maria, at Morrison, at Cross, at the people who had risked everything to help her find the truth. "I'm going to finish what I started." Her voice was stronger now, clearer. Project Athena used children to fight wars they didn't understand. Crimson Gate killed 27 people to protect one man's secrets. There are others out there. Other programs, other victims, other people who've been silenced and erased. She met Mitchell's eyes directly. "I'm going to find them. I'm going to bring them home. And I'm going to make sure no one else has to carry this weight alone." Mitchell studied her for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. "If you ever need support resources, authorization, protection, call my office. What you've done today deserves more than a hearing. It deserves recognition. It deserves justice." Sierra shook his hand. Justice would be making sure this never happens again. Then let's make sure it doesn't. 3 weeks later, Sierra stood in her new office at the Pentagon. The walls were covered with photographs, 27 faces, 27 names, 27 people who had died believing that someone was coming to save them. But there was a new section now, a section marked Survivors. And in that section, 3 photographs. Maria Santos, rescued after 3 years of captivity. Corporal James Webb, found in a black site in Syria. Extracted 2 weeks ago. Private First Class Elena Ruiz. Located through intelligence gathered from Haynes's files. Recovery operation scheduled for next month. 3 names moved from the dead to the living. 3 people who had been given up on, abandoned, forgotten. 3 reasons to keep fighting. Sierra's phone buzzed. A text from Morrison. "New lead. Possible survivor from Operation Nightfall. Different program. Same pattern. Same bastards. You in?" She typed her response without hesitation. "Always." A knock at her door. Maria stood in the entrance, looking healthier than she had 3 weeks ago. Still thin, still scarred. But there was life in her eyes now. Purpose. "You're working late." Maria walked in, sat in the chair across from Sierra's desk. "Some things never change. Some things are worth working late for." Sierra gestured at the photographs. "We found 2 more names today. Possible survivors from a program that was shut down in 2019. Similar profile to Athena." Maria's expression darkened. "How many programs were there? We don't know yet. But every time we pull a thread, we find more. More victims, more cover-ups, more people who've been carrying weight they shouldn't have to carry alone. And you're going to find all of them." Sierra looked at the 27 faces on her wall, at the people she couldn't save, at the weight she would carry for the rest of her life. "I'm going to try." Maria was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke, her voice soft. 3 years ago, when I was in that cell, I used to imagine what I'd say to you if I ever got the chance. Phoenix 7, the voice on the radio who went silent when I needed her most. Sierra's throat tightened. "What did you imagine saying?" "I imagined screaming at you, cursing you, making you understand what it felt like to call for help and hear nothing." Maria paused. "But then I started imagining something else. I started imagining that you were out there somewhere, carrying it, suffering, trying to find a way to make it right." She leaned forward. "I was right, wasn't I? You never stopped, never gave up, never let them become just names on a casualty list." "I couldn't," Sierra's voice cracked. "They deserved more than that. You deserved more than that. So did you." Maria reached across the desk, took Sierra's hand. "You were 17 years old, a child, and they broke you to protect their secrets." She squeezed gently. "But you didn't stay broken. You became something stronger, something that could tear down admirals and expose conspiracies and bring people home from places everyone else had forgotten." Her eyes were bright with tears. "I spent 3 years waiting for Phoenix 7 to come. And she did. She came through fire and bullets and impossible odds. She saved me when everyone else had given up." Maria's voice strengthened. "You're not the girl who killed 27 people, Sierra. You're the woman who's going to save the ones who are still out there, the ones who are still waiting, the ones who still believe someone is coming." Sierra's tears fell freely now. 3 years of guilt. 3 years of nightmares. 3 years of believing she was nothing but a murderer, a failure, a weapon that had been used and discarded. And Maria was telling her something different. Maria was telling her she was a hero. "I don't know if I can save all of them." Sierra's voice was barely a whisper. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." "You don't have to be strong enough alone." Maria stood up. "You've got me. Morrison, Cross, Webb, Torres. Everyone who stood with you in that hearing room. Everyone who believes in what you're doing." She walked to the door, stopped, turned back. "The girl who followed orders at Crimson Gate is gone, Sierra. She died in that facility 3 years ago. But Phoenix 7, Maria smiled. "Phoenix 7 is just getting started." She left. Sierra sat alone in her office, surrounded by 27 faces and 3 survivors, and the knowledge that somewhere out there more people were waiting. Waiting for someone to remember them. Waiting for someone to come. Waiting for Phoenix 7. She picked up her phone, dialed Morrison's number. "Colonel, that lead you mentioned. Tell me everything." She listened, took notes, started planning. Outside her window, the sun was setting over Washington. Another day ending. Another day closer to finding the next survivor. Another day closer to justice. Admiral Haynes was in custody. Project Athena was exposed. The conspiracy was unraveling. But the work wasn't done. The work would never be done. Because somewhere out there, someone was still waiting, still hoping, still believing that help was coming. And Sierra Donovan Phoenix 7, the girl who had been used and broken and buried, was finally truly, completely alive. She wasn't counting the dead anymore. She was counting the ones she would save, one by one, name by name, until every single person who had been forgotten, abandoned, and erased was finally brought home. That was her mission now. That was her purpose. That was her redemption, and it was only the beginning. Justice isn't loud. It's patient. It waits. It remembers. And when it finally rises, nothing can stand against it. Sierra Donovan remembered. And she would never stop. Not until the last name was crossed off the list. Not until the last survivor was home. Not until the last debt was paid. Phoenix 7 had risen from the ashes. And she was just getting started. Some people ask why she didn't break, why she didn't give up, why she kept fighting when everyone else had moved on. The answer was simple. 27 names on a wall. 27 voices in her memory. 27 reasons to never, ever stop. She carried them all, and she always would, because that's what it means to be a warrior. Not the kill count, not the ribbons, not the rank, just the weight, and the will to keep standing. Sierra Donovan stood. Phoenix 7 flew, and the ones who had been forgotten were finally forever remembered.